You know, when you walk past a really massive concrete structure like a hospital or, a sprawling parking garage,
Right. Yeah.
your eyes only ever register the concrete, right? You just see this like imposing gray exterior.
Exactly. The surface.
Yeah, the surface. But hidden entirely from view, just buried deep inside that gray facade, is this really complex, intricately woven network of steel rebar.
Well, definitely.
And it never shouts for attention. I mean, you rarely, if ever, actually see it. But structurally speaking, concrete has this incredible compressive strength, meaning, it can hold a tremendous amount of downward weight.
Right. But it has almost zero tensile strength.
Exactly. It cannot bend. It cannot withstand side-to-side shear forces at all. So without that invisible steel rebar inside it, allowing it to, flex and absorb kinetic energy, the entire concrete structure it just cracks and collapses under the pressure.
That is honestly an incredibly apt way to frame what we're examining today for you listening.
Yeah.
Because that concept, the invisible architecture that absorbs the shock waves so the larger structure doesn't collapse, that is totally central to the source material we're unpacking today.
Which is exactly our mission for this deep dive. So we're looking at a specific document that recently came across our desks. It's a Mother's Day tribute.
Right, published by a clinic in Georgia.
Yeah, a mental health practice based in Georgia called Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC. And, at first glance, it really just reads like this deeply moving, almost poetic acknowledgement of maternal strength.
It does. It's very beautifully written.
But when you layer this, philosophical tribute over the actual concrete logistics of what this clinic does, it opens up a really fascinating exploration.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because we're going to deconstruct how the abstract sort of romanticized concept of unbreakable caregiver strength, how that directly intersects with the cold, hard, on-the-ground reality of accessible mental health care.
Yeah, and that intersection is really where the value lies, I think, because, as a society, we're remarkably good at celebrating emotional resilience in the abstract, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. We write poems about it.
Uh-huh.
We buy greeting cards for primary caregivers and mothers honoring their sacrifices.
Yeah, Mother's Day brunch, all of that.
Right. But we almost never take a magnifying glass to the actual structural mechanics of that resilience. Like, what tangible logistical support systems actually have to exist in the real world to ensure that those caregivers—
The human rebar.
Yes, the human rebar of our families and communities, what needs to exist so they don't simply snap under the sheer tensile stress they endure every single day.
Right.
So today, we're analyzing CHC not just as a clinic, but really as a case study, case study in how to build a safety net for the people who act as a safety net for everyone else.
I love that. So let's start by looking closely at the specific language used in this tribute because it really carries a lot of psychological weight.
It definitely does.
The text opens with this very definitive claim. Mothers are built different. And then it expands on that, detailing, the strength to love endlessly, the strength to forgive. And then there's this specific phrase that really caught my attention.
Which one?
The strength to keep believing in the people they raised even when the world made it hard.
Yeah, that last phrase is really the tell, isn't it? Even when the world made it hard.
Right.
Notice how the text isn't painting caregiving or motherhood as this passive, serene state of grace. It is implicitly acknowledging profound friction.
Like pushing against a current.
Exactly. To maintain belief in someone or to endlessly forgive in the face of a world that's making things incredibly difficult, that requires an immense expenditure of cognitive and emotional labor.
Wow, yeah, when you put it like that.
It is an active, exhausting resistance against external pressures. It's not just a personality trait. It's a continuous output of energy.
And the text actually follows that up by stating this maternal strength is something the world quietly depends on. It honors those who are, quote, still pouring into her family, her friends, her community.
Right.
But, okay, here's where I have to step in and push back against the framing a little bit, or at least point out the hazard hidden in this kind of praise.
Okay, let's hear it.
If society, by the source's own admission, quietly depends on a strength that doesn't shout for attention and literally, holds entire generations together,
Yeah.
aren't we sort of bordering on toxic romanticization there? Like, it feels like we're praising mothers for carrying an unbearable load simply so the rest of society doesn't have to feel guilty about not helping them carry it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're touching on a really heavily debated sociological concept there. The idea that society often weaponizes praise to enforce unpaid labor.
Weaponizes praise. That's a strong way to put it.
It is, but it's accurate. When we label a specific group, like mothers, as being built different or possessing this, unbreakable strength, we're setting a really dangerous baseline
How so?
because we create a dynamic where their defining characteristic is their invulnerability. And if your core identity in your family or your community is being the unbreakable pillar, the psychological barrier to admitting you're actually fracturing becomes practically insurmountable.
Right, because how do you ask for help when your entire ecosystem assumes you're immune to damage?
Precisely. If you are the structural support, you aren't allowed to need structural support.
Man, that is heavy.
The pressure of being the unspoken glue for entire generations is immense.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot constantly pour emotional regulation, physical care, and systemic management into a community without depleting your own internal reserves.
You just run dry.
You do.
Yeah.
And this is exactly why a document like this coming from a mental health clinic is so interesting. Coping and healing counseling isn't just releasing a holiday platitude, right?
Yeah.
They're identifying a systemic vulnerability.
Ah, I see.
They're validating the massive load being carried, while simultaneously positioning themselves as the mechanism to help carry it. They are diagnosing the fatigue of that invisible architecture.
Which brings us to the operational reality of how a clinic actually attempts to support that architecture. Because they aren't just offering nice words here. Let's look at the logistical infrastructure CHC has set up.
Yeah, the logistics are really key here.
The source notes they are a 100% telehealth therapy practice, and they serve all 159 counties in the state of Georgia.
And, I mean, the scale of that is significant. Georgia is a massive state, and it has a really sharp divide between urban centers like Atlanta and highly rural, medically underserved areas.
Right, where you might have to drive hours to see a specialist.
Exactly. So by operating entirely via telehealth, they are completely bypassing those geographic limitations.
I do want to challenge the telehealth model for just a second, though. Because when we talk about deep, complex psychological work, which we'll get into shortly, there's often this assumption that therapy really needs to happen in a quiet, leather-chaired office to be effective.
Yeah, the classic Freudian couch setup.
Right. So doesn't doing therapy over a phone or a laptop from your living room kind of diminish the clinical impact?
It's a totally valid concern, and historically the field of psychology actually debated it heavily. But let's look at the mechanics of stress and accessibility.
Okay.
For a highly stressed caregiver, someone managing teenagers, maybe a full-time job, perhaps even aging parents, their nervous system is already operating near maximum capacity.
Oh, absolutely. They're redlining.
Right. So if you add a 45-minute commute, traffic, finding parking, and then sitting in a waiting room to their already packed schedule, you're just adding friction.
That makes a lot of sense.
You're increasing their cognitive load to access the very thing that is supposed to reduce their cognitive load. The logistical barrier often causes them to simply cancel the appointment or, never make it in the first place.
It's like, think of it like a computer's processor.
Okay, I like this analogy.
If a caregiver's brain is a CPU running at 99% capacity, just managing daily survival, asking them to execute a complex new program like commuting across town to a clinic is just going to crash the entire system.
That is exactly it. Telehealth removes that logistical CPU drain. It allows the intervention to meet the patient exactly where they are. It's like you said earlier, bringing the well directly to the thirsty, instead of asking someone who's already exhausted to walk miles to find water.
Right. And the source specifically mentions they are HIPAA compliant, which I imagine is crucial here.
It's massively crucial. HIPAA compliance in telehealth doesn't just mean secure servers, though that's part of it. It means creating a digitally sealed, totally confidential environment.
Even if they aren't in an office.
Exactly. For a mother whose only moment of privacy is sitting in her parked car during a lunch break, or maybe locking the bathroom door for 45 minutes, that secure digital connection transforms an unconventional space into a legitimate, protected, clinical environment. It prioritizes access over aesthetics.
Wow. Okay, so the geographic and temporal friction is removed. But the source material also goes into detail about the human infrastructure, right? The people actually on the other side of that secure connection.
Yes, the clinicians themselves.
It says they have a team of over 15 licensed therapists, and the document specifically lists a mix of LCSWs, LPCs, and LMFTs. And it notes they are a diverse, culturally competent team.
We really need to decode those acronyms because they aren't just interchangeable titles for therapists.
Oh, really? I always just assumed they were kind of the same thing.
A lot of people do,
Oh,
but they represent entirely different lenses through which a clinician views human suffering. So an LMFT is a licensed marriage and family therapist. They are heavily trained in systems theory. They don't just look at the individual mother. They look at the family as an interlocking mechanism. It's like, think of a mobile hanging over a crib.
okay. A mobile.
If you pull on one piece of a mobile, the entire structure shifts and sways.
Yeah, everything moves.
Exactly.
Yep.
An LMFT understands how a mother's stress alters the teenager's behavior, which in turn affects the marriage.
That's fascinating. And so how does that differ from the LCSW, that's licensed clinical social worker, right?
Correct. An LCSW is trained to view the individual within their broader socioeconomic and cultural environment.
So zooming out even further.
Yeah, they factor in systemic pressures, things like community dynamics, economic stress, workplace discrimination.
Okay, and the third one, the LPC.
An RPC, a licensed professional counselor, often focuses more heavily on the individual's internal cognitive and emotional processes.
Ah, I see.
So by having all three disciplines on staff, a clinic can actually match the specific architecture of a patient's problem with the clinician who is specifically trained to dismantle it.
That's incredibly smart. Let's expand on the culturally competent aspect, too, because, I mean, let's be honest, that term gets thrown around a lot in corporate literature as just a buzzword.
Oh, totally. It can feel very HR-driven sometimes.
Right. But in the context of mental health, especially in a state as diverse as Georgia, it must have a very tangible mechanical function in therapy. Like, if you are finally reaching out for help, you don't want to spend the first 3 sessions just explaining your culture to someone, right?
And that is the exact utility of cultural competence. It provides a therapeutic shorthand.
Shorthand.
Yeah. Let's say you belong to a cultural background where familial duty is absolutely paramount and discussing mental health outside the home is deeply stigmatized.
Which is very common.
Very common. If you finally overcome that immense barrier to seek help, and you are paired with a clinician who views your strong familial ties as, say, codependency rather than a core cultural value,
Oh, wow. That would be a disaster.
the therapeutic alliance shatters immediately.
Right.
You will feel judged, misunderstood, and you will likely drop out of care completely.
Because the clinician is pathologizing a cultural norm instead of understanding the pressure it creates.
Precisely. A culturally competent, diverse team ensures that the clinician understands the nuances of your specific community's expectations. They understand what it actually means to be the unbreakable pillar in your specific cultural context.
That makes total sense.
It accelerates trust, and trust is the primary vehicle for any psychological healing.
Well, that sets us up perfectly to look at what they are actually healing. We spent the first part of this deep dive unpacking the poetic, somewhat sanitized language of the Mother's Day tribute. You know, the endless love, belief, forgiveness.
Right, the beautiful parts.
But when you look at the actual clinical specialties listed by CHC in the source text, the contrast is stark. I mean, they also handle teen therapy for ages 13 and up and life coaching, but their specialties are a heavy, unvarnished list. Anxiety, depression, trauma, PTSD, grief, relationships, and stress.
It's a really jarring juxtaposition, isn't it?
Extremely. It's almost whiplash. You go from reading about the love that made all of us possible straight into treatment for PTSD and generational trauma. Like, how do we even reconcile those two realities within the exact same practice?
We reconcile them by understanding that one is very often the direct result of the other.
Oh.
The poetic language, the endless forgiveness, the holding together of generations that is the outward behavioral output.
Right.
The clinical is the anxiety, depression, trauma that is the internal somatic toll of producing that output. Mothers and caregivers are frequently the emotional shock absorbers of the family unit.
The shock absorbers.
Yes. When a family experiences a crisis or severe relational stress or generational trauma, the caregiver absorbs the kinetic energy of that impact to shield the rest of the system.
So going back to our structural engineering analogy, they're absorbing the shear forces so the concrete doesn't crack.
Exactly.
But that energy has to go somewhere.
It does. And over time, absorbing those continuous impacts causes microfractures within the shock absorber itself. That is when clinical anxiety and depression take root.
Wow.
It's the physiological and psychological consequence of sustained hypervigilance. The profound grief or PTSD they treat isn't happening in a vacuum. It is happening to the very people trying to hold the fabric of their families together while navigating their own deep wounds.
Which explains why they offer individual, couples, family, and teen therapy.
Exactly. When the pillar is compromised, the entire structure needs stabilization.
So we have a clear picture of the psychological burden, and we see how the telehealth model and the diverse specialized team attempt to address it. But there is a massive elephant in the room that we haven't touched on yet.
Ah, I think I know where you're going with this.
It's the ultimate friction point. A mother can recognize she is burning out. She can find a culturally competent therapist who offers telehealth, but right at the moment she gathers the courage to ask for help, she hits a wall made of money.
Yes, financial anxiety. It is arguably the single largest deterrent to mental health treatment in the United States today.
And this is where the source text provides some concrete data that fundamentally changes the conversation. The document outlines CHC's insurance policies. They work with major commercial insurers, Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, Humana.
Which covers a huge portion of the state.
Right. And the copay for those patients ranges from $0 to $40 per session. But the detail that truly stands out, the one that really got me, is their policy for Medicaid.
Yeah, this is huge.
For Medicaid patients, the copay is $0, not a sliding scale, just zero. And to actually put this into practice, their contact details are listed right there in the source. The phone number is 4004-832-0102. The website is chhtherapy.com, and the email is support@chhtherapy.com. They make it incredibly direct.
And to really understand the impact of that $0 Medicaid copay, we have to look at the psychology of spending money on oneself.
Especially for a caregiver.
Especially for a caregiver. Someone who is already operating under the assumption that they must sacrifice for their family.
Let's walk through that scenario. Imagine a mother who is completely depleted, maybe navigating severe postpartum depression or complex grief. She finally makes the agonizing decision to prioritize her own mental health.
Okay.
If the clinic comes back and says that will be $150 per session out of pocket, what does that do to her internally?
It creates an immediate catastrophic conflict of interest. In her mind, she is no longer just seeking help. She is actively diverting vital resources away from her children.
Right.
That $150 is a week of groceries, or a portion of the electric bill, or new shoes for her teenager. The financial barrier doesn't just prevent her from accessing the therapy, it actively compounds her emotional distress by inducing profound guilt.
She feels selfish for even trying to fix herself.
It turns the act of healing into a source of trauma itself.
That is heartbreaking.
It is. So when a clinic caps commercial insurance, copays at a maximum of $40, and completely eliminates the cost barrier for Medicaid patients who, by definition, are already navigating severe economic pressure, they are executing a profound structural intervention.
They're neutralizing the guilt.
A $0 copay neutralizes the guilt entirely. It aligns the financial reality of getting help with the clinical necessity of getting help. The patient can enter the therapeutic space without the compounding anxiety, the bill ticking away in the back of their mind.
That's a game changer.
It fundamentally alters the therapeutic alliance from the very first minute.
It changes the message from "we value your mental health if you can afford it" to simply "we value your mental health, period."
Exactly.
It is the ultimate alignment of their philosophical Mother's Day message with their actual business practices. They aren't just telling mothers they are valued, they've engineered a financial structure that proves it.
It is the difference between intent and impact. The intent of a tribute is to make someone feel seen. The impact of a $0 copay, combined with statewide telehealth and specialized clinicians, is to actually stabilize their life.
As we bring this deep dive full circle, it really becomes clear that these two elements, the poetic appreciation and the rigorous logistics, are just entirely codependent.
They absolutely have to be.
You cannot have the beautiful, unbreakable strength described in that tribute without the mundane, unglamorous reality of insurance panels, secure digital servers, and credentialed professionals to maintain it.
That is the core takeaway for me. The resilience of caregivers, mothers, and community leaders is a vital resource, but it is not infinite, and it is not magic.
No, it's really not.
It is sustained by real-world infrastructure. The model we've examined today, removing geographic barriers through telehealth, removing cultural barriers through diverse hiring, and removing financial barriers through $0 copays, that represents the blueprint for how we actually keep the invisible architecture of our society from collapsing.
For you listening, the application of this goes far beyond a single clinic in Georgia. Whether you are a parent constantly absorbing the emotional shockwaves of your family, or a teenager trying to navigate the overwhelming complexities of entering adulthood.
Or even someone who just serves as the quiet, reliable center of gravity for your friend group.
Yes, exactly. Recognizing your own structural limits is not a failure. Seeking logistical and professional support to manage your load is not a lapse in your strength. It is the exact mechanism required to preserve it. You cannot continue to act as the safety net if your own tensile strength is compromised.
Even the strongest materials require deliberate, ongoing maintenance.
Yeah.
To pretend otherwise is just to invite structural failure.
Which leaves us with a final lingering thought for you to explore on your own today. We've spent this time deconstructing the quiet strength of mothers, that invisible rebar hidden inside the concrete that society so heavily depends on. If the most vital strength holding our world together is inherently silent, designed to absorb pressure without shouting for attention, look around your own life. What other invisible pillars, maybe friends, colleagues, family members, might be quietly carrying a massive, unsustainable load right now?
That's a great question.
And more importantly, how might you step in to help them reinforce their architecture or find a secure place to drop their weight before they ever show visible signs of cracking?